I don't know that it's been 20 years. It's been a long time that we've partnered with Mercy, and we just believe in what they do so much. And I just never knew exactly what to do about it. And I went to a workshop there in February and loved it. It was a 2-day workshop and loved it and got so much information out of it and was just wondering the whole time, okay, what do I do with this? Now I am a counselor also, so I was like, oh, that works perfectly. So I can just see what I can do with that and, do workshops in our area to promote what is taught. Now, what is taught at Mercy, and to me, the beauty of Mercy are the results, because that's the bottom line, right? It's the bottom line. Do we get results? And yes, thousands upon thousands of girls. And, we can see, as it says there, well, in the slide before, you can't argue, well, but that's not really, like, for example, my counseling practice, I just had somebody call me this week. I have people call me every week. Do you take insurance? No, I don't, because it's all biblically based. And the same thing is for Mercy. They don't take any government funding, no insurance, nothing. And when you look at their facility, I had the privilege of going to their facility in February. It's beautiful. It's huge. Actually, there's 2 buildings in Nashville, and then there's one in Sacramento, and there's one in Louisiana, and now there's one in Florida, 140 beds. And there's one in New Zealand and Canada and England, and I'm forgetting Australia, I think. All over. Not a cent from the government. It's all donation based. And just a little note here, I'm a huge fan of Joyce Meyer, and she's a huge supporter because they have one in St. Louis also. Yes, there's a home in St. Louis. And I just saw this last week, actually, Joyce Meyer Ministries donates $35,000 a month to Mercy. So that keeps them going. That's one of the ministries that supports them. Because of the results, the girls' lives are completely transformed, and it used to be 15 to 28, and now it's 15 to 32. These topics are not pretty, but they're so needed in our society. When we did the workshop in October, we dealt with anxiety. We talked about addictions, which is a huge problem in our society, whether Christian or not. And I'm assuming that most of us in here are Christian. It's happening inside the church and outside the church. It's a huge problem, which is not something that churches can address on a Sunday morning. So we have to decide to just take on the torch, and just do something about it ourselves. We're all called to do something, right? And there's some heavier topics too that, we'll address maybe at future workshops, but they deal with a lot of issues: self-harm, suicide ideations. I mean, these are real things that people are dealing with. That we have to address as Christians, and know that we have, and everything that we talk about tonight, and we are going to have time for discussion also where you guys can discuss, but everything we do, we come from a position of power, of authority, of victory. So we're not victims in this. We're going to look at this, and the way that I see it, the way that I've studied, and as a counselor, I deal with it this way, and Mercy does it the same way, and that's how they have the results, is freedom is possible. It can happen for anybody. Freedom is possible, and especially with the power of Jesus. And, Nancy Alcorn, the reason she is so passionate and the reason this is such a successful ministry is that she knows that with God, with Jesus, this is possible. With the government, it wasn't possible. And she got tired of seeing young girls, she dealt with young girls, come through the program and then get out and then get right back into the problems that they came in with. And many times, she says, a lot of them ended up committing suicide or going right back into the gangs where they came from, and the situation just perpetuated. So she got tired of seeing that, and so she decided, you know what, we're just going to start my own thing. She didn't have any money. She didn't know how she was going to do it. But isn't that awesome how God works? He said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of everything. And now look at her. She's got all these homes around the world. So because she just decided to do something about it. So the point is, we can wake up, whether you have it yourself, and this is for whether you've struggled with depression yourself or you know somebody who has. This is helpful for all of us to help them. And the point is that there is freedom, and you can wake up every morning knowing, I can deal with this. I can do it. You know, this is something I can overcome. So this is where, we're all coming from that mindset, that freedom is possible, that we are victorious. So the first question that we want to ask ourselves, and I ask this when I counsel people or talk to a friend, do you want to be happy? It's that simple. Do you want to be happy? I read a book a long time ago, and there was a statement in it that said, happiness is earned. It's not a gift. Now, salvation is a gift. Yes, Jesus gives us salvation. He came and died for us. We are saved when we accept him. Happiness, however, is earned. You have to earn it. You have to make the right choices to earn your happiness. So that's the first question I just want you to be thinking about. Do you really want to be happy? There are keys. There are principles that you have to live by in order to be happy. So depression, we'll start out with the definition of what depression is. A common but serious mood disorder which causes severe symptoms that affect how one feels, how they think, how they handle daily activities such as sleeping, eating, and working. Depression also creates feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. It can last for many days or more and keeps us from living a life from a place of victory and vision. So it totally shuts down vision. I don't know if you've ever experienced it. If we're all really honest with ourselves, we might have experienced it, for maybe a morning or something, maybe a certain time of the month. Let's just be honest. But anyway, we can get past that. And sometimes, so the goal is to get out of that after a few hours, maybe, a few days. But if it doesn't stop, if it's a few days, weeks, months, then it's a little bit more serious, right? So let's look at the statistics you have in your sheets there. So the most commonly diagnosed form of depression is major depressive disorder. And I see this all the time. And sometimes people might think like they have it all together. They look good, smell good, they work fine. They're dealing with something. And you don't even know it, right? In 2015, around 16.1 million adults aged 18 years or older in the U.S. had experienced at least one major depressive episode in the last year, which represented 6.7% of all American adults. That's a pretty good percentage, and you'll see it's getting worse. It is estimated that depression costs our economy over $83 billion annually in lost productivity and increased medical costs. Depression is the leading cause of disability in the United States among people ages 15 to 44. So that's something to think about. A lot of young people deal with it. It has been estimated that up to 50% of the people suffering from depression are not currently receiving treatment. Now, as we'll see, this leads to problems in other areas of our lives. if we don't address it, it can turn into problems in our relationships, in our workplace, bad decisions. I mean, there's a whole list of things. By conservative estimates, 1 in 5 Americans has firsthand experience with depression, bipolar illness, or another mood disorder. Very serious. Okay, so according to recent United States World Health Organization research, a lot of words, depression will soon, listen to this, depression will soon be the second major global medical problem, followed by heart disease. Isn't that crazy? That is crazy. And I would submit to you, this is not something I read in the research, but I would submit to you that the bulk of this is in first world countries. First world countries. You might think, how? What? We have everything. We're comfortable. A lot of depression happens in the United States, Canada, Northern European countries that are very well-to-do, or Europe in general, but a lot happens in Scandinavian countries. And I just want you to be thinking, why is that? It's a big problem, and it can lead to more serious issues. It's definitely an issue we need to be aware of. It's important to call things for what they are. If somebody's suffering from depression, you know, a lot of times the attitude is, oh, you're a Christian, you shouldn't have depression. That is terrible. It's an issue that has to be addressed, and it can be experienced by anybody. So I want you guys to raise your hands if you have experienced depression before, or you know somebody who has or is currently. So that's everybody, pretty much. That's crazy. It's a big problem. And I want you to be thinking, what are some of the causes? This can cause a lot of problems in your life. Let's look at the signs, okay, for what depression does. Sadness, a loss of interest or pleasure in activities they used to enjoy, fluctuating weight, change in appetite, sleeping more or less than normal, agitation, fatigue and loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness and inappropriate guilt, difficulty concentrating and being decisive, feelings of hopelessness and dejection, and suicidal thoughts or plans. So, as you can see, these are all signs. Now, I don't know about you guys, but, I've felt depressed a time or two. And actually, and we'll talk about things that we can do to address depression. And I'm so excited about the steps that I'm going to give you guys, okay? And as we grow, as we mature spiritually, you get better. You don't get depressed as often, and you grow, and you just become a different person. I'm not going to tell you that you're going to reach perfection because you're not. You will experience, and it was interesting because as I was preparing this a week and a half ago, there was one morning where I had not felt like this in a long time. I was just depressed. And I was like, right? And I told you, I was just like, I don't feel like doing anything. And I just sat down and I was telling him about it, and I was just like, I just in one of those moods. And it's precisely how it says. You just don't feel like doing anything. You're just, the things you normally enjoy doing, you just don't want to do them. And it's so terrible. And usually when you're in those kind of moods, you don't want to do anything, and you don't want to listen to something uplifting. You just want to listen to a sad song, if you want to listen to anything at all. You just want, to tell the husband or a friend about what you're feeling. You don't, and he's a fixer. He went, okay, what's up? Okay, talk about it. Let's deal with it. Let's find a solution. And I'm like, can you just listen? I just want to talk. You just listen. But sometimes we just want to let things out. And you don't necessarily want to feel better at that moment. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. If it lasts a morning, now this particular case, it lasted, 3/4 of the day, then I was better. I was fine. But if it lasts longer than that, 2-3 days, that's when we need to start really addressing it. Whether it's a morning or 2 months, it has to be addressed, right? 2 months more serious. So there are 2 types of depression. Situational depression, which is caused by life changes, stress, loss, and it doesn't last long. That's the good news. It doesn't last long. So many of you in here might have experienced loss before, and I have experienced loss. Very, very close. My dad was the biggest loss that I've experienced. Very, very close to him. He was too young to die. And, as I was preparing this, I thought about that, and it was very, very hard on me, and it took me a little while to get back in things. And I think also because he was sick for a while, so I was preparing myself. But once it happened, because I had been preparing myself spiritually so much, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I was like, okay. And it was all supernatural, I know. God sustained me. Now, the shock period wasn't as bad as I thought. What sometimes with grief, it's after, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, a year later, you're still feeling it. It hurts, right? In my case, it's just I miss him terribly, and I for like 5 years probably, I had dreams where he was so real. But I wasn't distraught. And I think some of the things that we're going to go over are really going to help us, because we don't have to be distraught, because we have hope. We have hope. Okay, so that's situational depression. Chronic or clinical depression is a little more serious. It shows the same signs, but it lasts a lot longer and doesn't necessarily shift when circumstances change. So let's look at the causes in your worksheet there. Any type of loss, like we've talked about, transitions, changes in life, those can be hard. Moving, I've moved a lot, I know. Chronic medical conditions, unresolved anger. In my studies, as I was studying a lot to become a counselor, I found out that a lot of depression is caused by anger, unresolved anger. And we don't even realize it. It just gets bottled up in here, and you don't deal with it. It turns into depression because it hasn't been dealt with. Negative thinking patterns, we'll talk about that. Past or present abuse. Physical changes in the body. Perfectionism, performance, which sometimes we can inherit from our parents and grandparents. Poor boundaries in relationships. Boundaries are so key, and we had a wonderful talk at the workshop about boundaries, and Mimi helped me with that. Oh, I love to talk about boundaries. You know why? Because I learned so much as I was reading the book to prepare and preparing for it, and I realized that a lot of it I had problems with. and I recognized how it's important to have proper boundaries with people. Emotional, time boundaries, physical boundaries, spiritual boundaries. I mean, there's so many different types of boundaries. And sometimes we have stress, anxiety in our lives because we don't have proper boundaries with people. And that can cause tension, right? Especially in families. We'll get away from that. Side effects of medication. Medication can be a reason, and then alcohol and or drug intoxication, of course. So what is at the root of depression? So with Mercy and with what I've dealt with counseling is always from a Christian perspective, okay, a biblical perspective. Not even just Christian perspective, Because sometimes Christian counseling can be very broad. There are many different types of Christian counseling. We talk about creation therapy, biblical counseling. It gets to the root. There is a problem at the root. When there's depression, there is a problem. So we're going to talk about the root. Was it an event? Medication, that can be a cause. Or even vitamin deficiency. It's emotional or situational depression. We can overcome it. We just have to get to the root. So you have to ask yourself, where is this coming from? And that takes some work. And it's not that easy. It's harder than it sounds to really get to the root and figure out what's causing this. So if you go to a healthcare professional when you're dealing with depression, or Google, we get a lot of information from Google, right? You can start there. How do you overcome depression? Well, here are some steps. You seek out a good counselor. There's your first step from Google. You exercise regularly. Exercise, Stephanie. Here's a personal trainer. You can see her. Exercise regularly. And actually, as I was doing my studies on counseling, I found out that some psychiatrists, when people are being treated for depression, part of the treatment is half of the session is running. They run. Because that'll help you to overcome your depression, at least for that day. Because you're going to be thinking about, keeping up. I hate running. Anyway.
I thought you loved it.
I'm not running. Sometimes I love what you do. Take vitamins, good vitamins, not just any vitamins. Build a healthy community. We'll get back to that one. I think part of the reason why most of this depression is taking place in first world countries is because, I'm originally from Brazil, so Latin culture. Latin cultures are a lot more community oriented. You get together for anything, right, ladies? You just get together. You love to get together about anything. In first world countries, a lot of times you don't. People are very individualistic. Like they've done studies like in Sweden, Norway. My brother-in-law's from Sweden, so I've done a lot of research on Sweden. But Sweden, I think, has the highest suicidal rate in the world. And I think, and I've talked to my brother-in-law about that, it's because the society is so individualistic. Everybody's very much, let me just do my thing, just stay to ourselves, just give me my privacy, which, I like my privacy here and there, but you're supposed to live as communities, right? It really helps. The next one, refuse to isolate. So that's huge. If you're even thinking and like, I'm a little down today, the worst thing you can do is just sulk in your bed, which is what we want to do. Right? Just think about nothing. Just sit there and think about how your life is terrible. So we often buy the lie that we should just stay by ourselves and not see anybody. And that's a lie. Because then you won't really address it. You won't seek help. When you do that, you think, well, I'm the only one facing this. When we first got married, my goodness, was I a basket case. We were really young, and I had a lot of issues that I had to deal with. Not huge, but I just always thought that we were the only ones facing these problems. I would always tell him, we're the only ones who are so broke. Everybody else seems to have money for this. Everybody else seems to have it together, and we don't have this or that, or we're dealing with this. And he was like, everybody has problems. They just have different problems. But that was a big thing that I would say. It just felt like we were the only ones facing this particular thing, So it's important to get out into the world, get out like we're doing tonight, and talk to other people. And, they might not be dealing with the same thing you're dealing with, but they're dealing with something, and just hearing their problems might make you feel better. It can help. So refuse to isolate. When we isolate, our problem becomes bigger. and bigger, right? We just think about it all the time. And then the next thing is it's important to share our feelings. So that's according to Google. Medication is an asset. So we're not against medication. As an addition to the healing process, it can be powerful. So, I mean, I don't think that you should take medication permanently. You know, I know some people who are just addicted to medication. They take it all the time. You shouldn't do that, but it can be a help. For example, there was a girl who came into Mercy, and she had just seen so much trauma and so many addictions in her family that she refused to get on medication. So, but she wasn't even able to get out of bed or do anything. So her counselor suggested just take medication just to kind of get you going, you know, in the morning and to do things. And so she started taking medication along with the exercises that they were telling her to do. And we'll talk more about those. We went over a lot of those in the workshop for those of you who were there. If you're building your spirit and working on your soul and taking the medication just to get you going, that can be helpful. It's bad when it's all you do is take the medication. And then eventually you get off of the medication. Don't stay on the medication. Anyway, so this girl, finally, she got the treatment that she needed, and then she was able to get off the medication, and then everything was fine. But she first she couldn't even get out of bed in the morning. So if that's you, then of course you need to take medication. So how to get to the root. So that's what we're going to talk about for just a few minutes, and then we're going to have a little discussion time. Okay? This is huge. So how to get to the root. So number one, explore what is causing the depression. So if you want to take notes, this is good. Because you might need to have it for yourself or for somebody else that you want to help. Explore what is causing the depression. It could be a vitamin deficiency, like we talked about, past abuse, or lack of motion. You know, sometimes we're so sedentary, we just sit all day, and then we go home and we sit some more. We watch other people live their lives on TV. We can't wait to watch our show, you know, and it's like, when you think about it, you haven't really lived, you know, and you've sat. So get up more, go to a gym, you know, do something physical. It'll help. Or lies. Sometimes, many times, most of the time, we've been telling lies to ourselves. And we're going to talk about that. What are we thinking about on a regular basis? What are we thinking about? So within that first thing there, exploring what is causing the depression, we have heart hurts, traumas from the past. Some of us have had terrible things have happened to us in the past. And some things are not so terrible, but they just stay with you. And so that little root, that little thing that just bugs you, you know, and sometimes it's not addressed. Spiritual warfare. And this one, I have a slide for this one. John 8:44. Now, what is spiritual warfare? For those of you who don't know, is we have an enemy. Push this back. I feel like I told him I didn't like this. I like to be out here so I can see you better. So what is spiritual warfare? So we have an enemy, and his name is Satan, and he has demons. He has helpers. And he causes a lot of the problems that we deal with. Now, we can't blame him for everything. We do a lot of it ourselves. But he is a factor. They are a factor. Okay? So John 8:44 says, "For you are the children of your father, the devil, and you love to do the evil things he does. He was a murderer from the beginning. He has always hated the truth, because there is no truth in him. Because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and the father of lies." So what I just want us to take a minute to think about are the lies. We don't just hear lies from other people. We can be our own worst enemy sometimes. We just lie to ourselves all day long. And you might think, what kind of lies? Well, we'll talk about that. What is the opposite of lies? Truth. So where's truth found? In the Bible. Now, if you go out in society, they might tell you many different places where you can find truth, but, where do people even find truth these days, or any day, right? It's like what's true for this person is not true for this person. It's the ends justify the means, and it's like a big, confusing thing going on in society, right? So we have to know where truth comes from. So we have lies and we have truth. So he causes us to believe lies about our worth and our value, which means our thoughts. So our thoughts can be our worst enemy because of the lies we tell ourselves. So we have to think about what we're thinking about all day long. That's important. The enemy can plant wrong beliefs in our head. This is so huge. He can plant wrong beliefs in our heads. We buy the lie that's probably how I think about myself. And it's not necessarily true. He could have put that lie in your head, and you've just been thinking it for so long. Some of us, since the time we were 5. It could have been somebody told you weren't good enough. You're never going to amount to anything. How terrible is that? But some of us have heard this stuff when we were little. And you might not even remember. Some of you remember exactly where you were when somebody told you something like that. And it was usually a loved one. And that stays with you until you're 70, 80. So when you realize that you're living with that, you have to take authority. Now, I want you guys to just think about that word, authority. Because we have authority over the devil. We have it. We don't have to try to figure out, how do I deal with this? We have authority. And we have overcome him and his tactics. So when you understand that you have authority, you can overcome it. So it's possible to overcome depression or any other thing. So what is authority? It's the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. So whenever you're faced with a lie that you've been telling yourself, you just tell Satan or that thought where to go. So you get behind me, Satan. I don't accept this thought. I rebuke it. And you might, some people that around you might think you're a little bit, ooh, what is she talking to herself? You know what? Whisper it. But talk. Okay, so some of you were at the workshop. Let me see if you remember. So we talked about your thoughts. Can you change your thoughts with other thoughts? How do you change your thoughts? You speak truth. Yes, you talk. So you can change your thoughts. But you change your thoughts with words. You have to say it. You have to speak it. See, we live in a spiritual world, and we have to understand how the spiritual battle is taking place. So we have to speak. So that's why we've been doing a lot of exercises about speaking and the 3x5 cards and everything, because that's how we're really going to change our minds. So this is huge. So understand we have authority. Number 2, so number 1 was explore what is causing the depression, right? So number 2, identify what we're thinking about. So this is very related to what we've been talking about. So I want you to write this down. Experiences create beliefs, and if those beliefs are not based in truth, we will not live a life of freedom. So experiences create beliefs, and if those beliefs are not based in truth, we will not live a life of freedom. But
opposite of that, if we do believe truth, we can live a life of freedom. So now we have a job to do. We have to figure out what truth is. You know, remember I asked you a question, do you want to be happy? So to be happy, it takes work. Now we're going to bless you.
Thank you.
So to be happy, we're going to have to go to work and find out what truth is. When we find out what truth is, then we can start speaking that truth. And we can totally reprogram our brain. So it's a matter of taking time to figure out what you believe that is not true. And that takes some work. It's looking at the fruit of your thought processes. So when I think about a particular thing, what does it make me do? How do I act after I think this particular thing? And that's probably damaging a lot in my life. So if I'm thinking that I'm worthless, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to do what I need to do properly for my job, I don't want to work on my relationship that's been falling apart, I don't want to say the things that I should say to the person that, I've been having issues with. You see how that can affect what you do based on your thought process? So we have to look at the fruit of our thought processes. So our wrong beliefs is what is messing us up. So it can be anything from experiences with men. Some women, like some of the girls in Mercy, and we saw the two girls that came to and spoke at the workshop because of their experiences with men. They didn't have a very nice opinion of men, of belief about men. And they thought all men were jerks. Is that true? Are all men jerks? No, they're not. They're not. So it can be anything that leads us to our wrong beliefs. In thinking about what we're thinking about, I do want to address also when we lose someone. I know that there are people in the room that have just recently lost someone, and this is devastating. And I know because I've been there. Two misbeliefs cause us to have despair. One is that God is not the source of life, that man is. Therefore, we have no hope. And two, since I lost this person, my world has no significance anymore. I have nothing to live for. And you might think, well, I don't know that I've been saying that to myself. Well, pay attention to what you're thinking. And sometimes that's hard to really think about that. But when you don't want to do anything, when you don't see your way forward, when you don't see anything positive in your future, is because you think your significance was tied to that person. And as hard as it is, we have to see life beyond that person and keep going. Because it's not true. The depressed person believes he or she can never be happy without that person. And that doesn't have to be true. Not at all. So the good news is, we're going to get to some good news. Good news. While nearly all depressed people tell themselves they will always feel devastated and down, virtually all recover. This is statistically speaking. Okay, this is not me talking. This is statistically speaking, virtually all recover. So if you can have that end in mind, that virtually all recover, then you'll be in a better place. It is helpful to predict recovery if you're suffering from depression. As we're also thinking about things that we're thinking about along those lines, your beliefs about God. It's amazing how some people have totally the wrong beliefs about God. That God is the one that caused this. God is the one that killed this person, or not killed, but Like he's responsible for their death. God is a good God. He's a good God. He doesn't just kill innocent people for no reason, right? Satan does bad. God is good. That's the truth. So we have to just keep those two in the right categories, right? So God wants good for your life. So just understand that God is on your side. He wants good for you. Your wrong beliefs about people or about ourselves. So we're going to deal with the wrong beliefs about ourselves. If it doesn't bring life and a good life, it's not true. So we have to understand there's a difference between truth and fact. Like out in the world, you have facts everywhere, right? Well, a lot of times facts aren't even so factual anymore, but you have facts, things that happen, that take place, and you have truth in the Word, which is not necessarily a fact. For example, the Bible says, by His stripes I am healed. That's in Isaiah. Now, you might be sick. Your body might be sick. But you know what? I'm not going to believe that I'm going to believe that I'm healed in Jesus' name, because He promised healing. Now you might think, well, I'm feeling sick. I'm like coughing and I'm feeling terrible and I don't want to get out of bed. Sure, that's a fact. That's going on with me right now. But I'm going to speak the truth, which is that I am healed in Jesus' name. See, God is not bound by time. We have to see things before they take place. Does that make sense? It might be a little new to some of us here. But when you're depressed, for example, you have to just start speaking that you're fine, that you're going to be fine, that you're recovering. And then you'll get out of it. You might not feel fine that day, but you'll get there. Does that make sense? That is truth. Address the lies with Scripture. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Because this is huge. This is, again, where truth comes in, and this is how we change our thought process. And renew the mind. This is one of my favorite topics, and we talk about this all the time because it's so important. We have to renew the mind. And if I could take you back 25 years plus ago when we first got married, 25 years ago, and to now, the difference between me back then and me now, it's like night and day. Because I've renewed my mind in the last 25 years. I was a basket case then, emotionally, and now I'm much more stable, which is the goal. None of us are going to reach perfection, remember, in this side of heaven, but we can be stable and make good decisions, right? That's the goal. And live a good life and be happy, right? So that happens when we renew our minds. We have to renew our minds. The constant repeating of misbeliefs is what sustains and perpetuates resentment. So if any of you are feeling resentment towards yourself or somebody else here today, I want you to listen to that. The constant repeating of misbeliefs is what sustains and perpetuates resentment. On the flip side of that, constant repeating of the truth generates peace and health. So that's in the Word. It actually causes you to have physical health. What goes on in here. That's huge. Even when we've had loss, it doesn't have to be the end of our lives. So number 3, so we did number 1, number 2. Number 3, we need to build connection and community. Isolation is not helpful, as we talked about. You need to be hidden. You cannot be hidden and survive or thrive. And you know, when it comes to depression, it can get pretty serious. It can lead to addiction, or it can lead to worse than that, right? Addiction can be bad enough, but so isolation is not helpful, and you cannot be hidden. And God created us to be relational people. He created us to come together and do things together, you know, like we're doing tonight, and we're going to, you know, really get to know each other. And
talk things out and learn from each other. And then number 4, which should be 4 and 5, but this is a huge one. Seek out strategy and stand in your authority. There's that word again. So in seeking out strategy, you have to have a plan. Okay? So ask God, what do I need to do to overcome this depression? So when you ask God a question, you always have to be prepared and brave enough to accept the answer that he gives you. It's been hard in my life sometimes. Okay, so it might be, here's some examples. Change jobs. Sometimes that's causing our depression. You know, a sweet lady who works very hard with us, Becca, she couldn't be here tonight because her job, she hates her job. She tells us all the time. She's trying so hard to get a new job. So we've all been praying for her together for her to get a new job, because sometimes that can be a huge burden on us, physically, emotionally, and so on. Or sometimes it's get a job. That could be, a reason. Read a book. Sometimes we are just kind of lazy, right? Like, I have to read a whole book. And God might be telling us, I want you to read this book. Instead of sitting down and doing social media one more night, just spending hours checking everybody else's lives or whatever, just take the old-fashioned book and just read, right? It can totally change your brain. Exercise. God might be telling you to exercise. He might be telling you to end a relationship. Sometimes we have to end it or change it somehow, right? Because they're hurting us. Forgive someone. And this is where we really have to do some internal assessment, right? To see if we've really forgiven a person. Change diet. Sometimes that can be the cause of it. Change diet. Oh my goodness. I was talking to a friend this week, and she was just saying how she has a friend who unfortunately has such poor diet, that has had poor diet for so long, that now she is in such, she's overweight, and she's so overweight that she cannot go visit her daughter, and her grandkids live far away, and she can't even visit her daughter. So how sad, right? And it's like, how do you tell your friend? You need to maybe think about changing some things, So that's something to think about. So next verse, Andre? Sorry. Thank you. James 4:7, then we'll get to the video. Humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So as I said, we have a spiritual warfare that's going on. I mean, that's whether you agree with it or not, like it or not, there's a spiritual warfare going on. And you can decide to be on the winning side, or you can be a victim, and you can just get run over. But there is a war going on. So how do we win this war? How are we a successful soldier? Humble yourselves before God. Everything that we do, we compare ourselves to a tree. Okay, and I'm going to do this in 3 minutes or less because I'm so excited about our testimony. So this is a tree, right? And in the workshop I had the ladies draw a tree, and I don't know how many people drew the roots of the tree. You drew the roots. Sometimes people, like at the workshop that I went to, I think like more than half did not. So very few people drew the roots. So when we look at a tree, so we're comparing ourselves to a tree, what we see are the branches, right? We don't see the roots most of the time on a tree. So if we're comparing ourselves to a tree, the branches are our behaviors, our attitudes, the things that people can see. So what is that? Like, for example, addictions. If you're having addiction, people can see that. You can see that. Alcoholism, promiscuity, I mean, that's something that's a behavior. Any action that you take that people can see, those are the branches, okay? Now, the actions that we take, the behaviors, are all caused by the trunk, okay? The trunk upholds the
the branches. And what is the trunk? The trunk is our belief system. So our belief system is triggered by things that we have been taught, things we have experienced in our past that causes us to believe a certain way, which then causes the way that shapes the way that we think. Then it will lead to the way we act, right? So the trunk, as you can see, upholds the branches. Now, the problem with secular counseling, psychiatrists, and I'm not against them, they have their place and they do great work. But like, for example, Nancy Alcorn was very frustrated in a secular counseling situation because most of the time they just trying to, trim the branches. They try to stop the behavior. You're an alcoholic, you have an addiction, let's work really hard to try to stop the addiction. Let's work hard to try to stop the negative behavior, whatever is hurting you. And that really doesn't solve the problem. You might go back to it 2 years from now. That's why I loved when the Mercy Girls came. They had been free for 10, 12 years. Right? Mm-hmm. How did they experience that freedom after all the stuff that they went through? The roots. So the roots is what we focus on. So the roots is where everything started. Why are you addicted to pornography? Why are you addicted to drugs? Why are you having promiscuous sex for no reason? Right? There's a reason. So this could be because of rejection in your past, abuse, events, traumatic events that happen in your life, wrong teachings, molded you since from the time you were little. All these things shape who you are. And when you understand somebody's story and what they've been through, you begin to understand. It makes you less judgmental because you realize, wow, they've been through a lot. And how can I judge somebody's actions because I have no idea what they've been through, right? And it all starts right here. So this is when we get these roots healed, the branches that are sick are just going to fall off. The tree is automatically going to be healed because we deal with the roots. We're dealing with the roots and trimming those. Does that make sense?